The crystal spires of Cytheria Prime gleamed under the twin suns, but today their light seemed dim. Ambassador Zixithan stood before the great viewing wall of the High Council chamber, watching the sky with 4 of his 6 eyes, while the other 2 focused on the emergency meeting behind him. The Cytherian Federation had ruled this corner of space for 3,000 years. They were a peaceful people, tall and thin like glass sculptures, with minds sharp enough to bend space and time to their will. Their technology was the envy of the galaxy. Their cities floated in perfect harmony with nature. Their people had not known war for 1,000 generations. None of that mattered now. "The outer colonies have gone silent," reported Council Leader Thylon, her melodic voice trembling. "Kepler Station, New Harmony, the research worlds of the Spiral Arm, all of them. Nothing but static on the communication channels." Zixthan turned from the window. Through the clear walls of the chamber, he could see the orbital defense platforms hanging in space like metal flowers. Beautiful, sophisticated, and utterly useless against what was coming. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 47 vessels in the defense fleet," replied General Kindar, the only Cytherian in living memory to hold a military rank. "Each one carries the most advanced shielding and energy weapons in known space. Our computer systems can calculate 1,000,000 battle scenarios per second." Zixthan made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. In his people's language, it meant bitter irony. "And yet we lose every engagement." The truth hung in the air like a poison cloud. The Cytherian Federation was dying, consumed piece by an enemy they could not understand and could not defeat. The Vorthak Empire had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 6 months ago. They were not like any species the Cytherians had encountered before. Where the Cytherians were individuals working together, the Vorthak were a hive mind that thought as one. Where the Cytherians built cities of light and art, the Vorthak constructed massive bioships that fed on the planets they conquered. Where the Cytherians sought knowledge and peace, the Vorthak wanted only to consume and grow. "Show me the latest battle reports," Zixithan said, the chamber filled with holographic displays. Battle after battle, the story was the same. Cytherian ships would engage the enemy using perfect tactics calculated by their advanced computers. They would score hits with weapons that could melt asteroids. They would achieve technical victories that meant nothing, because the Vorthak simply did not stop. Their bioships would absorb damage that should have destroyed them and keep fighting. When a Vorthak vessel was finally destroyed, 3 more would take its place. They fought without fear, without hesitation, without any concept of retreat. They were like a disease given form and purpose. "We cannot win this war," General Kindar said quietly. "Our people were not made for this kind of fighting." It was true. The Cytherians were too civilized for war. When their soldiers saw the horror of battle, they fled or froze. When their ships took damage, the crews panicked. They could build the finest weapons in the galaxy, but they could not find the will to use them effectively. "What about our allies?" asked Council Leader Thylon. "The Terran Federation? The Zephyrian Republic?" Zixthan's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep sadness. The Terrans sent a message of support and a supply ship. The Zephyrians offered to take our historical records for safekeeping. None of them will send military aid. And why should they? The Cytherian Federation had been the strongest power in this sector. If they could not stop the Vorthak, what hope did smaller civilizations have? Better to hope the hive mind would be satisfied with Cytherian space and leave the rest of the galaxy alone. Zixithan moved to his personal console and began accessing the most secret files of the Federation. Files that most Cytherians pretended did not exist. "Ambassador," said Thylon carefully, "what are you doing?" "Research," he replied, his long fingers dancing over the controls. There must be someone in the galaxy who can help us. The data streams flowed past his eyes. Military records from across known space. Reports from the Galactic Survey Corps. Warning bulletins from the Trade Federation. Most of it was familiar and useless. But then something caught his attention. A red warning label. A quarantine notice. A file marked with every danger symbol in the galactic. Database.Sol-3. Earth. The Death World. Zixton had heard stories about the humans, though he had never believed them. According to the reports, they came from a planet so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing on its surface. Poisonous atmosphere. Crushing gravity. Weather that could kill with wind and water. Wild animals that hunted in packs. Plants that could dissolve flesh out somehow, impossibly. Intelligent life had evolved in this nightmare world. The humans had only been part of galactic civilization for 50 years. And in that time, they had gained a reputation as dangerous primitives. They still fought wars among themselves. They still used chemical explosives and metal projectiles instead of civilized energy weapons. Their military ships were crude and ugly compared to the elegant vessels of more advanced species. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy conflict. Where other species fought only when necessary, humans appeared to view battle as a natural part of life. They had concepts in their language like honor and courage that made no sense to peaceful civilizations. The galaxy had decided to contain them in their own solar system and hoped they would eventually become civilized. Until now, no one had been desperate enough to ask for their help. Zixton opened the communication channel toward the Sol system. The signal would take 3 days to reach Earth, and he had no idea if the humans would even respond. But as he composed his message, he felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope. "This is Ambassador Zixton of the Catherian Federation." He spoke into the transmitter. "We are under attack by a hostile force called the Vorthic Empire. Our civilization faces extinction. We have tried everything we know, but we are not warriors. We are asking for help from anyone who can hear this message." He paused, thinking of his beautiful world and his peaceful people. Soon, if nothing changed, it would all be gone. SOS. Genocide in progress. We have nothing left to offer but our gratitude to anyone brave enough to help us. The message launched into space, carrying with it the last hope of his species. Now all they could do was wait and see if the Deathworlders would answer. Admiral Sarah Chun was drinking her morning coffee on the bridge of the UEF, indomitable when the universe changed forever. The massive warship hung in space near Jupiter, part of the Terra Defense Fleet that most of the galaxy believed was just a collection of primitive patrol boats. They had no idea that Earth had been quietly building one of the most powerful military forces in known space. Admiral called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "We're receiving an unknown transmission from outside the solar system." Chum set down her coffee mug, a simple ceramic cup that had belonged to her grandmother. It looked out of place on a bridge filled with advanced holographic displays and quantum computers, but she kept it anyway. It reminded her that humans had come from simple beginnings. "Put it through," she said. The bridge filled with the voice of Ambassador Zixton, speaking in the universal trade language. His words were calm and polite, but Chun could hear the desperation underneath them. As she listened to his plea for help, she felt something stir in her chest, something that her people called righteous anger. "Ma'am," said Torres when the message ended, "should I forward this to Earth Command?" Chun was already standing up. "Yes, but also send it to every ship in the fleet. Emergency priority." Within minutes, her communication board lit up with incoming calls from dozens of ship captains. Admiral Rodriguez of the Cerberus, Captain Williams of the Destroyer Squadron, Commander Park of the Marine Transport Division. Every one of them had heard the message and every one of them was asking the same question. When do we leave? Chun smiled. This was why she loved the human military. Other species would spend weeks debating and analyzing before making a decision. Humans heard that someone needed help, and their first instinct was to grab their weapons and go. Attention all fleet commanders, she broadcast. Emergency conference in 1 hour. We have a situation. The holographic meeting room of the Indomitable filled with the images of 50 senior officers from across the Terra Defense Fleet. Some were aboard massive dreadnoughts that could crack moons. Others commanded carriers full of fighter pilots who had trained for this moment their entire lives. A few spoke from the bridges of ships so secret that even their names were classified. You've all heard the message from the Cytherian Federation, Chun began. Intelligence reports confirm that this Vorthic Empire is real and extremely dangerous. They've already consumed several star systems and show no signs of stopping. Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. His ship, the Cerberus, was an assault carrier designed for boarding actions and close combat. With respect, Admiral, what's our interest in this? We don't have any treaties with these Cytherians. It was a fair question. Earth had deliberately stayed out of galactic politics for decades, content to let other species think of them as backwards isolationists. But Chum had been waiting for this moment, and she was ready with her answer. Because, Admiral Rodriguez, this is what we trained for. For 50 years, Earth has been preparing for the day when something truly dangerous would threaten the galaxy. Something that the peaceful civilizations couldn't handle on their own. She activated the main display, showing the tactical situation in Cytherian space. Red markers showed Vorthic fleet positions advancing like a plague across the star map. The Cytherians are advanced but peaceful. Their weapons are sophisticated, but they don't have the will to use them effectively. They're asking for help from Deathworlders because they need someone who knows how to fight. Captain Williams of the Destroyer Squadron raised her hand. What are we looking at in terms of enemy capabilities? Chun brought up the intelligence files that had been gathered from long-range sensors and refugee reports. Bioships, self-repairing, high tolerance for damage. Hive mind collective intelligence. No apparent fear response or self-preservation instinct. The room was quiet for a moment as the officers processed this information. Then Commander Park of the Marine Division spoke up. So they're tough, they don't quit, and they think as one mind. Sounds like they've never fought humans before. Laughter rippled through the conference room. It was not pleasant laughter. It was the sound that human predators made when they found worthy prey. Chun felt a surge of pride in her species. These officers came from Earth's unified military, forged in the brutal wars that had finally brought peace to their homeworld. They had trained in the asteroid belts, fought in zero gravity, and prepared for every form of warfare imaginable. They were the children of a world that had produced warriors for 10,000 years. What's the fleet status? She asked. Full readiness, reported Admiral Rodriguez. The Cerberus battle group can deploy in 6 hours. Marines are loaded and ready for boarding actions. Third Fleet reports ready for deep space operations, said Captain Williams. We've got enough supplies for a 6-month campaign. One by one, the reports came in. Dreadnought squadrons with their massive kinetic cannons. Fighter wings with pilots who had trained in the rings of Saturn. Support vessels carrying the ammunition and supplies needed for extended warfare. Even the special operations ships, so secret that their existence was officially denied. Admiral, said Torres from outside the conference. We're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Chun accepted the transmission. The face of Fleet Admiral Harrison appeared on a private channel, visible only to her. Sarah, he said without preamble, I assume you've heard about the situation in Cytherian space. Yes, sir. The fleet is requesting permission to respond. Harrison was quiet for a moment. He was old enough to remember when humanity first reached the stars, only to discover that the galaxy saw them as dangerous primitives. For decades, they had played along with that perception while secretly building their true strength. "Permission granted," he said finally. "Full fleet deployment. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Show the galaxy what happens when someone calls for help from Earth." Chun ended the private communication and turned back to the assembled officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our orders. Full fleet deployment to Catherian space. We leave in 12 hours. The conference room erupted in controlled chaos as captains began coordinating departure schedules and supply requirements. Admiral Rodriguez was already calling his Marine commanders. Captain Williams was reviewing jump calculations with her navigation teams. The entire Terra Defense Fleet was transforming from a peacekeeping force into a war machine. Chun walked to the main viewport of her ship and looked out at the fleet. 300 vessels of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts to quick patrol ships. Each one carried the deadliest warriors that humanity had ever produced. The galaxy thought of humans as primitive Deathworlders, barely contained within their own solar system. They had no idea that Earth had been using that time to prepare for exactly this moment. While other species built beautiful cities and advanced technologies, humans had built something else. They had built the finest military force in the galaxy. "Admiral," called Torres. "The fleet reports ready for departure." Chun picked up her coffee mug and drained the last of her grandmother's blend. Then she set it carefully in its holder and turned to face her crew. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Jump to Catherian space. Time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders really mean." The stars shifted as 300 human warships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the answer to a desperate plea for help. The galaxy was about to learn that when someone sent an SOS to the Deathworlders, humanity didn't send a ship. They sent an armada. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Catherian territory. And Admiral Chun immediately knew they were too late to save the outer worlds. The sensor displays on the Indomitable showed a scene of devastation. Where colonies once orbited peaceful stars, now only debris fields remained. The beautiful space stations of the Catherian Federation had been reduced to twisted metal and frozen atmosphere. In their place, massive organic shapes moved through the darkness like hungry predators. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Torres. "Those things are huge." The Vorthic bioships were unlike anything in the human databases. They looked more like living creatures than spacecraft, with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts and weapon ports that opened like mouths full of teeth. Some were small and quick, darting between the debris like sharks. Others were massive beyond belief, the size of small moons, slowly digesting the remains of conquered worlds. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "I'm reading over 200 Vorthic vessels in this system alone. They appear to be feeding on the asteroid belt." Chun watched as one of the smaller bioships approached a chunk of metal that had once been part of a Catherian space station. The alien vessel extended tentacle-like appendages and began dissolving the wreckage, absorbing it directly into its hull. The ship actually grew larger as she watched. "Signal from the Catherian homeworld," called Torres. "It's Ambassador Zixithan." The holographic display showed the alien diplomat in what appeared to be an underground bunker. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and 3 of his 6 eyes were dark with exhaustion. "Admiral Chun," he said, relief evident in his musical voice. "You came. We had hoped, but we did not dare believe." "We're here, Ambassador," Chun replied. "What's the tactical situation?" "Not good. The Vorthic have consumed the outer colonies and are now attacking Catheria Prime itself. Our defense fleet is down to 12 ships. We estimate perhaps 6 hours before the planet falls. Chun looked at her tactical display. The enemy outnumbered her fleet, but numbers had never been humanity's advantage. Their strength lay elsewhere. "All ships," she broadcast on the fleet channel. "This is Admiral Chun. You can see what we're dealing with. These are not machines or energy beings. These are biological entities that feed on destruction. They don't think like us, they don't fight like us, and they probably don't fear like us." She paused, letting that sink in. "But they've never fought humans before. They don't know that we come from a world where everything tries to kill us. They don't know that we've been preparing for this fight our entire species' history. They're about to get an education." Admiral Rodriguez's voice came over the com from the Cerberus. "Admiral, my Marines are requesting permission to board and examine one of those bioships." Chun smiled grimly. Only humans would want to get closer to something that terrifying. "Permission granted, Admiral. Take a small task force and see what makes these things tick." The human fleet split into battle formations as they advanced into the system. The lead elements were the heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts, their massive kinetic cannons already charging for the first shots. Behind them came the carriers, launching swarms of fighters that moved like angry wasps. The Vorthic response was immediate and overwhelming. The bioships turned toward the human fleet like antibodies responding to an infection. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. Then the shooting started. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature supernova. Vorthic energy weapons, organic things that looked like lightning made solid, reached out toward the human ships. But where other species relied on shields to absorb such attacks, human vessels simply moved out of the way. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered Captain Williams from the destroyer squadron. Her ships twisted and spun through space like dancers. Too quick and unpredictable for the alien weapons to track dot in return. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that shocked the Vorthic collective consciousness. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the humans used kinetic projectiles. Chunks of metal accelerated to tremendous speeds by magnetic fields. Nuclear warheads designed not just to destroy, but to irradiate. Chemical explosives that created shrapnel clouds. It was primitive. It was brutal. It was devastatingly effective. The first Vorthic bioship to take a direct hit from a human dreadnought simply came apart. The kinetic round punched through its organic hull and detonated inside, creating a chain reaction that rippled through the creature's body. The massive form convulsed once and then went still, leaking biofluids into space. "Target destroyed," reported the tactical officer with satisfaction. But the Vorthic were quick learners. The hive mind processed the human tactics and adapted within minutes. The bioships began using evasive maneuvers of their own, their organic hulls flexing and changing shape to avoid the kinetic rounds. More importantly, they began to focus their fire. "Multiple contacts converging on our position," called Torres. "They're trying to surround us." This was the moment Chun had been waiting for. Other species, when faced with superior numbers, would try to retreat and regroup. Humans did something different. "All ships," she ordered. "Attack formation Delta. We're going through them." The human fleet formed into a spearhead and drove straight into the heart of the Vorthic formation. It was a maneuver that would have been called suicidal by any military academy in the galaxy. The humans did it with enthusiasm. Admiral Rodriguez's assault carrier, Cerberus, led the charge, its thick armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed lesser ships. Behind it came the Marines in their boarding pods, ready to do something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. They were going to board an enemy vessel in the middle of a space battle. Cerberus to Fleet Command. Rodriguez reported as his Marines launched toward a medium-sized bioship, beginning boarding operations. Chun watched on her tactical display as 20 small pods attached themselves to the organic hull of the Vorthok vessel. Each pod carried 10 Marines in powered armor, equipped for combat in any environment from vacuum to acid rain. "First squad reports breach," came the voice of Sergeant Lopez over the comm. "We're inside. This thing is alive. The corridors are pulsing like arteries. Gravity is weird. Atmosphere is breathable, but smells like death." For the Vorthok, the concept of boarding actions was completely alien. Their bioships were parts of their collective organism, not separate vessels that could be invaded. They had no protocols for dealing with enemies inside their own bodies. The Marines moved through the organic corridors like an infection, their weapons cutting through biomechanical defenses that had been designed to repel energy attacks, not explosive rounds and plasma cutters. Within minutes, they had reached what appeared to be the creature's brain center. "Cerberus actual," Lopez reported. "We found the control nexus. It's some kind of organic computer. Requesting permission to plant charges." "Permission granted," Rodriguez replied. "Light it up." The bioship convulsed as explosions tore through its nervous system. For the first time in its existence, the Vorthok collective experienced something like pain. The massive creature began to list to one side, its organic weapons falling silent. "Enemy vessel neutralized," reported the Cerberus. "Marines are extracted and ready for the next target." Across the battlefield, other human ships were achieving similar results. The destroyer squadrons used their speed to get close to the bioships and target specific organs. The heavy cruisers concentrated their fire on the largest enemies, systematically dismantling them with precisely placed kinetic strikes. Most shocking of all to the Vorthok, the humans showed no fear. When their ships took damage, the crews kept fighting. When they were outnumbered, they attacked anyway. When retreat would have been the logical option, they pressed forward. Ambassador Zix then watched the battle from his bunker on Catheria Prime, his 6 eyes wide with amazement. "They fight like madmen," he whispered to his aide. "No, not madmen. They fight like apex predators defending their territory." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chan allowed herself a small smile as she watched the tactical display. The Vorthok were still dangerous, still numerous, but for the first time since the invasion began, they were the ones being pushed back. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare for Phase 2 of the operation. We're taking this system back." In the depths of space, the human fleet regrouped and prepared for the next attack. They had shown the Vorthok that Deathworlders were not just another species to be consumed. They were something the hive mind had never encountered before. They were warriors. The war changed after the Battle of Catheria Prime. For 3 months, the human fleet fought the Vorthok Empire across a dozen star systems. What started as a rescue mission became something much larger. Every victory brought new intelligence about the enemy, and every piece of intelligence revealed just how dangerous the hive mind truly was. Colonel Diana Walsh stood in the briefing room of the assault carrier Cerberus, surrounded by holographic displays showing enemy positions across the front. She had been fighting the Vorthok longer than anyone in the human fleet, and the experience had taught her things that no military academy could have prepared her for. "The bioships are adapting faster than we anticipated," she told the assembled Marine commanders. "They're growing new defenses specifically designed to counter our weapons. Thicker armor where our kinetic rounds hit most often. Internal barriers to prevent boarding actions. Even some kind of acidic coating to damage our equipment." Captain Foster of the 3rd Marine Battalion leaned forward. "So they're learning from our tactics. What's our response?" Walsh smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "We learn faster." The truth was that the Vorthok had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human warfare. They assumed that, like other species, humans would develop a set of tactics and stick with them. They had no concept of an enemy that could completely change their fighting style in the middle of a battle. Over the past months, human forces had shown a terrifying ability to adapt. When the bioships developed thicker armor, the Marines switched to acid-based weapons that could eat through organic hulls. When the enemy created internal barriers, human engineers designed shaped charges that could blast through any biological structure. When the Vorthik tried to use toxic atmospheres to kill boarders, humans simply fought in vacuum suits and turned the lack of air into a tactical advantage. Intelligence reports indicate that the enemy is preparing something big, Walsh continued. All their remaining forces are converging on the Nexus system. Whatever they're planning, they're betting everything on it. Admiral Chun's voice came over the intercom from the bridge. All senior officers to the command center. Priority briefing. The holographic conference room filled with the commanders of the human expeditionary force. 3 months of constant warfare had changed them all. Their uniforms were patched and worn. Their faces showed the strain of fighting an enemy that seemed to come from nightmares. But their eyes still burned with the determination that had brought them across the galaxy. Reconnaissance has confirmed our worst fears, Chun began, activating the main display. The Vorthik are constructing a planet-killer weapon. The image showed a massive structure in orbit around a dead world. It was clearly organic, like all Vorthik technology, but its purpose was unmistakable. The weapon was the size of a space station, with focusing arrays that could channel enough energy to crack a planet's crust. Estimated completion time is 72 hours, Chun continued. If they finish this thing, they won't need to invade systems one by one. They can sterilize entire worlds from a safe distance. Admiral Rodriguez spoke up from his position aboard the Cerberus. What's our tactical assessment? Grim, Chun admitted. The weapon is defended by the largest concentration of bioships we've ever seen. Over 500 vessels, including some new types we haven't encountered before. Our fleet is down to 230 operational ships after 3 months of combat. The room was quiet as the officers processed this information. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, facing an enemy that had grown stronger and more dangerous with every battle. By any reasonable military calculation, the mission was hopeless. Captain Williams of the Destroyer Squadron was the first to speak. Admiral, with respect, when has being outnumbered ever stopped us? Murmurs of agreement came from around the room. These were humans, children of a world where being outnumbered was just another word for Tuesday. They had evolved from prey animals that learned to hunt in packs. From tribal warriors who had conquered continents. From a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The question is how we approach the target, Chun said. Intelligence suggests that a direct assault would result in 90% casualties before we could even reach the weapon. Colonel Walsh leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her scarred face. She had been thinking about this problem for days, and she believed she had an answer. It was a terrible answer, but it was the only one that might work. Admiral, she said quietly, what if we don't try to destroy the weapon? Every eye in the room turned to her. Chun raised an eyebrow. Explain. The Vorthik hive mind has one critical weakness. It's never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. They calculate odds and make logical decisions. But humans don't always think logically. Walsh activated her personal display, showing a tactical plan that made several officers intake breath sharply. We divide the fleet into 2 groups. The main force engages the defending bioships in a conventional battle. While they're distracted, a smaller group rams the planet killer with everything we've got. The silence in the room was deafening. What Walsh was proposing was a suicide mission on a scale that even humans had rarely attempted. Admiral, Chun studied the plan carefully. Casualty estimates? For the ramming group? 100%. For the main fleet, probably 60 to 70%. Admiral Rodriguez was the first to volunteer. The Cerberus will lead the ramming group. My crew has been itching for a real challenge. Negative, Chun said firmly. This is my operation. The Indomitable will ram the weapon. With respect, Admiral, said Captain Williams. This is a job for the destroyers. We're smaller, faster, and we've got the most expendable crews. Arguments broke out around the room as every commander volunteered for the suicide mission. It was a uniquely human moment. Faced with certain death, their first instinct was not to find a way to avoid it, but to fight over who got to die first. Chun held up her hand for silence. We'll draw lots. Fair and simple. An hour later, the human fleet began its final approach to the Nexus system. The plan was insane by any reasonable standard. They were going to attack a superior enemy force, sacrifice a significant portion of their own ships, and hope that their willingness to die would accomplish what their weapons could not. The Vorthic hive mind detected their approach and prepared for battle. The bioships formed defensive formations around the planet killer, their organic hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. They had calculated the odds of this engagement, and they knew they would win. They had no understanding of human psychology. As the battle began, Admiral Chun opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. Today, we fight not just for the Cytherian Federation, but for every peaceful species in the galaxy. We fight for the idea that civilization should not bow to tyranny. We fight because someone has to. She paused, looking out at the enemy fleet that filled space before them. The Vorthic think they understand warfare because they've conquered weaker species. They're about to learn what happens when Deathworlders decide to make a stand. All ships, attack formation. Time to show them what we're really made of. The human fleet charged into the teeth of the enemy formation like wolves attacking a bear. Behind them, the volunteer ramming group prepared for their final mission. In the depths of space, the tide of war was about to turn. The Vorthic were about to discover that some enemies would rather die than surrender. And that when humans made that choice, it changed everything. The final battle lasted 18 hours and changed the galaxy forever. Admiral Chun watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as her fleet tore itself apart to save a species they had never met before that day. The main battle was a storm of fire and metal, with human ships dancing between biovessels 10 times their size. But her attention was focused on the smaller battle happening near the planet killer. Weapon. Captain Williams had won the lottery for the suicide mission. Her destroyer squadron was racing through the Vorthic defensive line, their ships taking massive damage as they pushed toward the organic weapon. One by one, the destroyers were falling to enemy fire, but the survivors kept going. Williams to Fleet Command, came the voice over the comm, distorted by static and damage. We're through the first line. Beginning final approach. Chun could see it happening on her tactical display. 3 destroyers left out of the original 12, their hulls glowing with heat from enemy weapons. They were going to make it. Then the Vorthic hive mind did something unexpected. It spoke. The communication came on all frequencies, in every known language. The voice was like the sound of a million creatures speaking in perfect unison, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Humans of Earth, it said, we acknowledge your strength. We offer terms. Surrender now, and we will preserve your species. You will become part of our collective. Your aggression will serve our purpose. Admiral Rodriguez laughed from his position aboard the Cerberus. Did they just try to recruit us? Other voices came over the comm from across the fleet. Laughter, mostly, but also something else. Pride. The deadliest hive mind in known space had just acknowledged that humans were too dangerous to simply destroy. Chun opened her own communication channel, broadcasting on the same frequencies the Vorthic had used. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Federation. she said calmly. "We appreciate the offer, but we must respectfully decline. Earth's children don't join collectives. We prefer to remain free." She paused, watching as Captain William's destroyers reached their target. "Besides," Chan added, "we're about to demonstrate why that would be a bad idea for everyone involved." The 3 remaining destroyers hit the planet-killer weapon at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The impact was visible across the entire star system, a flash of light that temporarily outshone the local sun. When the radiation cleared, there was nothing left of either the weapon or the Phaeomis, ships that had destroyed it. The effect on the Vorthic hive mind was immediate and catastrophic. For the first time in their existence as a collective consciousness, the Vorthic experienced doubt. They had calculated the odds of this battle perfectly. They had accounted for human tactics, weapons, and technology. What they had not accounted for was the human willingness to die rather than accept defeat. The concept was alien to their nature. As a hive mind, they valued the collective above any individual, but they still understood self-preservation. They had never encountered a species that would willingly destroy itself to prevent others from being destroyed. Across the battlefield, bioships began to hesitate. For creatures that had always acted with perfect coordination, uncertainty was like a poison in their system. Some vessels continued fighting while others tried to retreat. The perfect unity of the hive mind started to fracture. Colonel Walsh led her Marines in one final boarding action against a massive bioship that served as a command node for the enemy fleet. This time, they weren't trying to capture or disable the vessel. They were trying to do something much more dangerous. "Third Squad, plant the psychological warfare package," she ordered as her troops fought through the organic corridors. "Let's see how their hive mind handles a little chaos." The device they carried was a human invention, designed specifically for use against collective intelligences. It was a sophisticated computer virus wrapped in a quantum transmission package, designed to introduce random noise into neural networks. When it activated inside the bioship's brain center, the effect was immediate. The local node began broadcasting confused signals to the rest of the hive mind. Instead of coordinated battle commands, it sent fragments of human music, poetry, and most damaging of all, human humor. The concept of laughter was completely incomprehensible to the Vorthic. It served no logical purpose, conveyed no useful information, and yet humans seemed to value it highly. As jokes and comedic references flooded through their neural network, the hive mind experienced something like madness. Bioships across the fleet began to move in random directions. Some fired on each other by mistake. Others simply stopped functioning entirely as their crews tried to process the alien concept of finding tragedy amusing. "All ships," Admiral Chun broadcast. "The enemy is in disarray. Press the attack." The human fleet, battered and reduced to less than half its original size, threw itself into the chaos with renewed energy. They had learned something important about their enemy. The Vorthic were unstoppable when united, but vulnerability when divided. More importantly, they had learned something about themselves. They were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new in the galaxy, something that could not be understood or predicted by logical calculation. The battle ended not with a grand explosion, but with a whimper. One by one, the bioships simply stopped fighting. Some tried to retreat into deep space. Others remained motionless, their crews apparently catatonic. The great Vorthic Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was collapsing from within. Ambassador Zixthathan watched the aftermath from the bridge of a Kytherian rescue vessel, his 6 eyes wide with amazement. Around him, other members of the galactic community observed in stunned silence as human ships moved through the debris field, rescuing survivors from both sides of the battle. "They're helping the wounded Vorthic," he said in disbelief. "After everything those creatures did, The humans are providing medical aid. It was true. Human medical ships were extending aid to any bioship that signaled surrender, treating injured Vorthik with the same care they showed their own wounded. It was a concept that the hive mind found even more confusing than humor. Admiral Chun received the surrender of the Vorthik Empire 3 days later. The communication came from what appeared to be individual bioships rather than the collective consciousness. The hive mind had fragmented into thousands of smaller groups, each trying to understand what had happened to them. "We do not comprehend your species," the message said. "You fight without logic. You sacrifice without gain. You show mercy to enemies. We cannot predict your actions. We cannot continue this war." The formal surrender ceremony took place in orbit around Cytheria Prime. Representatives from across the galaxy came to witness the impossible. The mighty Vorthik Empire, which had seemed destined to consume the entire galaxy, was laying down its weapons before a small fleet from a world most civilizations considered primitive. Ambassador Zixithan approached Admiral Chun after the ceremony, moving with the careful grace of his species. "Admiral," he said, "the Catherian Federation would like to offer humanity full membership in galactic civilization. You have more than earned a place at the council table." Chun considered the offer carefully. It was everything that Earth's diplomats had worked toward for decades. Recognition, respect, and a voice in galactic affairs. "I appreciate the offer, Ambassador," she said finally, "but I think we'll stay where we are." Zixithan's 6 eyes blinked in confusion. "I do not understand. Do you not wish to join the galactic community?" Chun looked out at her battered fleet, preparing for the long journey back to Earth. Many good people had died in this war, but they had died protecting others. That was something worth preserving. "We'll always be here if you need us," she said. "But somebody has to watch the frontier. Somebody has to be ready for the next threat that comes from the dark between stars." She turned to face the alien diplomat, and her expression was both kind and implacable. "Besides, the galaxy isn't ready for what happens when Deathworlders get civilized. We're much more useful as we are." The human fleet departed Catherian space a week later, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. Word spread quickly through the civilized worlds about what had happened. The humans, the primitive species from the Death World, had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that no one else could face. They had shown mercy to creatures that had shown none to others. They had sacrificed everything to protect people they had never met. And most importantly, they had proven that in a universe full of dangers, someone was watching. Someone was ready to answer the call when peaceful civilizations found threats they could not handle alone. The galaxy had its guardians now. They lived on the edge of known space, on a world that would kill most visitors within hours. They called themselves humans, but everyone else knew them by a different name. They were the Deathworlders, and they had made it clear that they would answer any call for help. The universe was a little bit safer because of them.